Alrighty, welcome back, everybody, to some more Death Stranding. Let's see where we left off. I don't remember. My cat's being a little bastard. Hang on. Do not press the power button, please. I'm begging you. No. Yo. What? What? What do you want? What is this? The Novelist's Son, Dreamcatchers, Gourds, and Quipus, I believe is how they pronounce that. Let's look at we got a couple new charms, I believe. What else have we gotten? What am I running? I am running an extra battery level 1. I could upgrade that. Oops, what did I do? $1 coin. Has the chance of increasing your chances of finding chiral crystals. That's kind of cool. Has some kind of effect against BTs. Said to help keep timefall at bay. I would prefer if we had less timefall to deal with. Okay, we're at North Mountain Nada. So were we heading west or east rather? Is that the game plan? Do I want to go and do this to start?
Clear. Weapons detected. All weapons will be locked until departure. All clear.
I should have weapons with me. I do. Okay. Grab that, and I believe there were a couple others here that wanted me to retrieve things. That one's urgent, so I actually don't want to do that until 14 minutes. I want to be careful with that. Play that one safe.
Beginning scan. Pleasant journey. Keep on keeping on. Weapons restrictions lifted. Good morning, Sam.
Someone's happy.
Am I turning here? I am. All right. I actually do want to be kind of careful here because there's a lot of these guys. You dumb bastard. What are you doing? They're slipping and sliding all over. Wouldn't last a minute in my shoes. Alright, I think I am ready for them to start bringing the boys over. Gotta go get the truck before it despawns. I actually don't know how far away you can get from it. Oops. Wrong button. What's that guy hauling ass for? What, did he see me? Hmm. Now I'm not sure how to approach this. He's like, what the fuck? What just punched me in my nards? My gonads. My skin pouch. I don't know. That's a fantastic question. Uh-oh. I don't think that's gonna save you, bud. Okay, I think that's actually all but this last guy. These fucking sleep grenades are insane. Nice. Okay, that's everybody. Oh!
There we go.
There we go. Okay, I actually forgot the controls on... forgot how to use the controller now.
Right on. Okay, just a bit further now. Stretch my legs.
Truck bed is full of what? Oh, gosh. Okay, ooh. Sorry, I can't take these. Do you think all their stuff will be here if I leave and come back? I can't put it back in the... I can't put it back in the post box. Ooh, we're gonna have to leave some stuff then. Wait, is that all the stuff I needed, though, out of this? Yeah. Can I fit? I can.
Right on.
We're gonna go drop everything off over here. Because it's right around the corner. Ish.
What can't you do? Beginning scan. Scanning bridges ID. Verifying ID. Clear. Weapons detected. All weapons will be locked until departure. Cargo verified. Thank you. Hey. Good work. New.
And do you have anything heading back that direction? Oh. Okay, I can do that. Yeah, I can do this. And other than that, not really? Not really? Okay.
Order assigned.
There, that should have freed up a good chunk of space for us. Yeah, it did.
Weapons restrictions lifted.
I may as well grab the spiritualist one. Okay, it's not all gone yet. I should just park this over... Hang on, yeah, I should just park this over here. I'm gonna park this here. I'm gonna throw all of my junk in the vehicle. And let's just run around and collect everything and bring it back. Okay, I did get this stuff up there already. Beautiful.
God damn it. Too close. Come on. Keep it together.
Sam, just get to the vehicle. It's right there, please. That's everything. Almost. There's still some in the other mailbox now.
Right on. Okay.
Okay, we can leave. Give me that too, I guess. I think we're good here. Let's roll out.
Next time you know.
What's up, fellas?
Gotta stretch my legs.
Okay. I'm gonna drop some stuff off here. We're gonna go back over to the novelist's son, turn his stuff in,
Can't you do?
and then we'll come back around,
Sam,
head back west, or east rather.
beginning scan. Scanning bridges ID. Verifying ID. Clear. Weapons detected. Decontaminating suit. All clear. Welcome, Sam Porter Bridges.
Silver hand. Upgraded the compass. Now can be used to temporarily short circuit enemy trucks.
You know, I still can't. Thanks.
Good work. New order.
More. Oh, right. Okay, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Let's just grab some of everything. What am I not going to do? That. Yeah. That should be easy enough. We'll do that real quick. Silver hand. Greatly increases the power of the user's left hand. That's cool and all, but it probably, I'm gonna guess, it replaces my gravity gloves. Oh, hang on. Put all of that in the private locker because I have nothing in the truck, right? Nothing in the truck? Well, hang on. I want a new vehicle. Is this the fast one? All right, truck. Stay there. I'll be right back.
Have a pleasant journey. Keep on keeping on.
I just gotta go grab something.
Weapons restrictions lifted.
Why'd they put the energy zone in the middle of the road? It's not gonna cause issues if they're... when the network gets expanded and, like, people actually start using these roads.
Still got you.
I took the quest, right? I did, okay. Ow. Whoa! Oh my god, those are porters. Scared the hell out of me. You guys are gonna want probably a stronger weaponry than that, I'm gonna be honest. Coming through this territory, yeah.
Let's roll.
Whoa! Thing gets some pretty sick air time, doesn't it? We got that taken care of.
Hey, you know, I still thank.
Good work. New or...
Okay. Oh no, and we need the machines. That is now, that's everything. We can leave now.
Order assigned.
Okay, we're gonna head south. We're gonna hit up Novelist Son Photographer. We're gonna come back. We're gonna pick up the stuff in here.
Beginning scan. Have a pleasant journey.
Look out, boys.
Weapons restrictions lifted.
Hey, buddy. We're on electricity fire right now. Okay, there you go, Speed Demon.
Beginning scan. Scanning bridges ID. Verifying ID. Clear. Weapons detected. All weapons will be locked until departure. Car...
Okay, already 4 stars. This guy's not that bad. Holy moly.
Doubt a guy like you needs help from a guy like me, but I figure I ought to offer. This is for you, if you want.
Ooh. He has given you a decryptobio. What does that mean?
Be careful out there, Sam. We can't afford to lose you.
Good work. New order available.
Guess I can take this. That's fine. What's going on, Lucas? No way you're still playing this. We're 100. Well, I'm getting all the Steam achievements. We're getting all the Steam achievements. Yes, I have to play this. We're so close.
Order assigned.
We're so close.
You be careful now.
I fear you're now a realer fan than me. I'm a fake fan.
Weapons restrictions lifted.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, I might be inclined to agree. And I don't mean nothing by it. I don't mean nothing by it other than the fact that I think that's just a fact. We're coming up on 100 hours in this game. I got 2 more areas that I need to discover. I need the collector and the first prepper. And actually, I don't think there's anything out here. I really don't think there is. Maybe one more. I don't know. I haven't seen any other cargo. Collector, the first prepper, and then I just have to 5-star everything. Oh yeah, I gotta get the pizza. But we're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. We're in the part of the game where I don't even need to see BTs anymore. I got a weather charm. Just me, myself, and I out here.
Someone's out here.
How have you been, Lucas? How's I know that there has been some stuff going on with you that I'm not gonna out you here. I'm not gonna out you. But I know what's going on. Got my eye on you, Lucas.
Oh, you're here.
Thought you would hear stuff today, but nothing. I see. Probably tomorrow. Okay. I gotcha. Well, you know, I hope it's good news. Obviously, I'm not wishing for your downfall. You've done nothing to wrong me.
Look,
I hope things turn out well enough. It's a chance for good news. Enough to give you hope. Okay. I can respect that.
you'll come back again soon.
Give you something to look
Right,
forward
Max?
to. Hopefully.
Good work. New order available.
We did it. Okay, we can leave now. I'm done here.
Weapons restrictions lifted.
We can go to the other side of the map again. Spiritualist? Fine, yeah, I'll grab the spiritualist. Oh, okay, those guys are not back yet. That's good. That's good.
I wonder if anyone's watching.
Safe travels. Have a pleasant journey.
Okay, there you go, Speed Demon.
Hang on, I think I do want to put something on, actually. I think I do want to put something on. Give me a moment.
Charge.
Can you have a functioning economy if the only employers in your city are casinos? I sure hope so, because that's what they're trying to do in the city of New Vegas from the hit 2010 video game Fallout New Vegas, and I want to know how it's working. I want to know the unemployment rate. I want to know what kinds of jobs people are doing. I want to know if the casinos have enough security guards to overthrow the local government, and much more. To figure all of this out, we're going to have to do something called a direct survey, which is where I walk around and catalog every single NPC, including the ones with no names, to figure out if they live here, if they're working, who they work for, and what they actually do. Then I'm going to put all of that data into the ugliest spreadsheet you've ever seen, analyze it, and try to figure out how the local economy of New Vegas is doing. We're going to start our survey all the way at the north gate of New Vegas, which is the main entrance to the city, and the first thing that I saw up there was this: 5 robot police officers watching my every move. Now, these robots are technically working, but we're not going to account for them in the actual unemployment survey because they aren't sentient beings. What we will do is mark them down as employed robots and then make a note of just how many of them there are, which is going to be helpful in determining whether or not New Vegas is a police state. Once we get inside the city itself, we see a little bit of employment on the street, including these dancers doing promotional work for a casino, a stand-up comedian telling jokes on the street, this guy selling weapons for you
gotta be
to
kidding me.
smuggle into the casino,
I missed
and then
this
this
one.
lady selling snacks and drinks on the side of the road. It's just like real Vegas. I've never been. You also might notice a lot of these army people walking around, sometimes stumbling around. These people are technically employed, right? Because they're enlisted by the government of the New California Republic, but none of them actually live here. New Vegas is its own autonomous city, and these soldiers all live in an embassy on the south side of town, meaning that they're all just deployed to New Vegas temporarily rather than actually being permanent residents. If you don't know anything about New Vegas lore, don't worry about it. It's not going to be important for this video. Just know that these people are basically tourists rather than residents. There are also a ton more police robots around, 28 across the city in total, depending on how exactly you count it. Not to get ahead of myself, but if you included these robots in the population count, they would make up nearly a quarter of the city's total residents. Imagine if a quarter of real Las Vegas residents were robots with rocket launchers. That would be, I believe, 600,000 robots with rocket launchers, which would be enough to have one on every single street corner in the entirety of real Las Vegas, which I think kind of answers our question about New Vegas being a police state. But what about the economy? That's the important thing, is the economy. Since there isn't much employment outside on the streets, the real work that we have to do is going inside. There are 6 buildings we need to go in, including 4 massive casinos, a hotel, and then a warehouse. And then there are 2 buildings that are controlled by the New California Republic that we can just completely ignore. Now, since the casinos are going to take me literal hours to go through, we're going to start with the 2 smaller buildings. But before we do that, we have to talk about underpants. You guys want to guess what kind of underpants I'm wearing right now? You probably already know. MeUndies. MeUndies are the most comfortable and the best underpants that you can buy, okay? I have some that I bought with my own money, even when I wasn't being sponsored by them. I'm wearing them right this very second. No, I'm not going to show you. How many times can I get away with doing that bit? I don't know. Now, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I do have a couple of pairs. You can see them right here. I'm going to blur the brand, but I do have a couple of pairs of what I call my underwear. So if all of my MeUndies are in the wash and then I go to grab a pair of underwear, if one of these comes out, I have my day is worse when I have one of these. And then when I finally wash them and I get to grab one of the MeUndies, I have a better day. I wish that was a lie, but it's true. Like a little bit of serotonin is based on whether I get to wear these incredibly comfortable underpants or not. If you've never tried them before, the good news is they do have a money-back guarantee. So if you buy them and you put them on and you're like, you know, I just don't actually, these aren't for me, you can send them back. They'll give you a refund. No questions asked. And believe it or not, right now, as a listener of my show, you can score sizzling summer deals like up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/AnyAustin and enter promo code AnyAustin. That's right, MeUndies.com/AnyAustin, promo code AnyAustin for up to 50% off. I'm reading it off of a thing. But come on, that's part of the gig. MeUndies, comfort that's made for summer. Thankfully, the comfort of MeUndies does not change once summertime is over. I know that that slogan makes it sound like it does, but it doesn't. Actually, they're comfortable year-round. All right, back to the video. So the 2 smaller buildings that are worth looking at here are the warehouse and the hotel. Let's start with the warehouse. There are 3 people in the warehouse. There's a guy named Mike, there's a girl named Kate, and there's a person named Assistant. Mike works as an artist, and he actually made all of the signs that we see around the city to promote the casinos. And then Kate and the assistant are both people who also help out in the shop. Congratulations on your employment, everybody. Hopefully you're having a great time.
Oh, I can't feel the warmth anymore.
The other building is a hotel, which surprisingly only has 1 employee, Sarah. Sarah works the front desk and the gift shop. I guess she cleans all the rooms and does everything else. Thank you for your employment, Sarah.
It's just that I really like it here.
Now, aside from the 10 people that we've talked about so far, every other person in New Vegas works for one of the 3 casinos on the Strip. If you've played New Vegas, you might be asking yourself, isn't there a 4th casino? Yes, there is, but there's nobody in it. Not a single person, not even an old, decrepit man in a vat of liquid. So we can ignore the 4th casino. The 3 casinos we have to look at are called the Tops, Gomorrah, and the Ultralux. And it turns out that the basic structure of all 3 is pretty similar. They've got a receptionist, they've got a bunch of security, there are card dealers, chip dealers, bartenders, and entertainment of some kind. And then each casino is also owned by a particular group or family, and then some of them might have unique positions like cult leaders or spiritual leaders or line cooks. But by and large, if you've seen one, you've kind of seen them all, which is great. It makes my survey easier. In total, the Tops employs 28 people, the Ultralux Ultralux employs 17, and Gamora employs a whopping 35 people. Now, despite that, the Tops, rather than Gamora, has the most security guards in total, but Gamora has by far the most entertainers, which makes sense since they are as much of a strip club as they are a casino. Most of the staff in the casinos is unnamed, but there are a few named NPCs as well, mostly when it comes to the owners and operators. A guy named Swank runs the Tops, and this lady named Marjorie seems to run the Ultralux. I couldn't figure out who runs Gamora. I looked in every single room, and there wasn't anybody who said they were the owner, so oh well, I guess.
You guys
and then there are a
get
few
a
other
car,
named
man.
NPCs, but a lot of those folks, like Heck
Get a bike.
Gunderson here, these people are in from out of town, and you'll find if you talk to most
Get
of
off
those
the
named
road.
NPCs, a lot of them are visiting from somewhere else, and they say as much.
They want to do business with me, they got to play by my rules.
Now, I fully admit that we probably missed one or two people, but unfortunately, with recent federal budget cuts to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and a new executive disinterest in good data, they've stopped allowing us to pick locks and trespass like we used to do for our unemployment surveys because they can't afford the bail money. Take it up with the voters. With the casinos done, that makes 117 people here in New Vegas, which is easily the biggest economy we've seen in any Bethesda game, but we aren't done yet, not even close. There's actually a whole population of people here that we haven't even touched. It's no surprise to anyone that New Vegas would attract a lot of tourists, a lot of people who are, in town but don't actually live here. And for a lot of these folks, it's pretty easy to tell because you can just ask them, like I said.
Darn far it is, our ranch.
But there are a lot of them that you can't ask. A lot. Altogether, there are 80 additional NPCs in New Vegas that are named one of two things. 23 of them are named Traveler, and 57 of them are named Gambler. And we need to figure out if these people are locals, tourists, or a mix of both. Now, I feel like the Travelers are obviously tourists. The name just, makes that very clear. So the big question is gamblers. Is there any evidence that the gamblers aren't from New Vegas? I spent ages going back and forth between the casinos, following these people around, repeatedly listening to their voice lines for any clues about what separated these two groups. But the things they said were always kind of vague. Some of them sounded more local,
I hope you're doing well, friend.
but others sounded more touristy.
I hear the Securitrons are tougher since their faces changed.
So instead, I started following them up to their rooms where they were staying and seeing what types of places each group hung out in. And that's when I started to notice some interesting patterns. The first thing I noticed was that travelers never gamble. If somebody is gambling, they are called gamblers. Now, what do you think the odds are that none of the gamblers are tourists? I'd say 0%, right? Which means that it's possible that gamblers are tourists who are here to gamble, and travelers are tourists who are here to sightsee and eat food and so on.
I'm not really gambling.
You can even find gamblers and travelers staying in the same hotel rooms. To me, this is pretty clear evidence that the titles indicate what the person is here for rather than indicating where they come from, and as a result of that, I'm going to assume that all of these people are in fact tourists. This means that of the roughly 200 people in the New Vegas Strip at any given time, about 40% of them are tourists, and that's not even including all of the soldiers stationed here. If you include the soldiers as well, that number swells to nearly 55%, which is funny because the real Las Vegas Strip on your average day is apparently also made up of about 55% tourists. I'm sure that wasn't intentional on the part of Obsidian, but it's definitely interesting to realize how close they got just by guessing. All right, we have finally finished surveying every single person in New Vegas, over 200 individual NPCs, and guess what? Every single person that can have a job here does have a job here. New Vegas has an unemployment rate of 0%. Wow. Incredible. Here's the thing. That wasn't really New Vegas. I mean, it was. Like, technically, that is the section of the map that Dr. House, turned into a post-apocalyptic gambling paradise. But surveying only this portion doesn't actually capture the economic situation of the area, and it doesn't really show how the local economy is doing, because just like in real Vegas, most of the people don't actually live on the Vegas Strip. They live in the suburbs, right? And in this case, the suburbs is a whole other town called Freeside. Anyone in the mood for another direct survey? Unlike the New Vegas Strip, Freeside is actually kind of a real place. You've got stores and bars and a casino and doctors and gangs and even children. I know that it's technically more like run down than New Vegas, but in terms of like community, I feel like this is easily the more desirable place to live. Just like every city in this game, there isn't really a municipal government, but there is a pretty large gang called the Kings who all dress up like Elvis for some reason. And they do provide security and they control the local water supply. And And they have secret sex rooms in their headquarters, which is basically like any municipal local government, you know? At least based on my experience here in New Orleans. If we consider all of the gang members employed, which I do, that gives us 14 people employed plus this groupie. I'm not sure if I count this groupie as employed because it specifically says groupie rather than hooker, which is what most of the sex workers in this game are called. That said, we only consider people unemployed if they don't have a job, but they need a job. And she clearly doesn't need a job. She's doing just fine. Part of the community, right? So she is not applicable. There's a bar in a casino just down the road from the King's headquarters with plenty of folks working as well, including bartenders, a chip cashier, dealers, and entertainers. They've even got a crier, which is somebody who stands outside and tries to get people to come into a business, like those people who spin the signs at Little Caesars. Out on the streets, you'll actually find children playing, which is a nice change of pace, as well as a ghoul named Rotface. At first, I thought Rotface was unemployed because when I first walked up to him, he just asked me for money.
Got a cap for me?
But then I realized that every time I gave him money, he would give me information, which is absolutely a valid job. Thank you for your employment, Rotface. Inside this store, you'll find two employed people named Ralph and Mick, both of whom will sell you supplies, and then back outside is a full-on proper food vendor named Gennaro, or possibly Gennaro. The last place that we have to look in Freeside is the Old Mormon Fort, which is a sort of charity health clinic that's full of employed people. You've got 5 security guards, 2 unnamed doctors, and several named characters like Julie Farkas here who all work to provide free healthcare to the people in and around New Vegas. They've even got a couple of those travelers and gamblers in their beds, which implies that even the rundown suburb of Freeside gets tourists now and again. Or I guess maybe it implies that there's no doctors in New Vegas, so that if you get sick, you have to come here, but whatever. I believe in Mr. House. The one exception to all of this is a fellow named Wayne. Wayne is what you would call a scavenger, where he goes around collecting scrap and selling it to local merchants in exchange for money that he can use to gamble. I went back and forth on whether or not to count Wayne as employed, because technically he is gathering and reselling things for money, which is basically what, Walmart does. But in real life, when we meet people who are doing this, we kind of stigmatize them and think of them as unemployed or undesirable. But by our definition, Wayne probably does count as employed. He's doing something in order to make money, in order to take care of himself, which is what a job is. That's what I'm doing right now. So, Wayne, thank you for your employment. Which means that in total, Freeside has a population of 49 people and an unemployment rate of 0%. Okay, this is weird. Now, full disclosure, there are technically a few more settlements sort of nearby to New Vegas that we are not including in this video. There's a large military fort with a sharecropper farm here. There's a whole other town a little ways away to the west called the West Side. And there are a few random little shops and houses to the east. But the purpose of our survey today is to figure out how the core of New Vegas itself is doing and if it's really the paradise that it seems. All of these other places are clearly distinct settlements, and in some cases they aren't even really settlements at all. So including them would both take way too long and dilute the data. But regardless, both New Vegas and Freeside have 0% unemployment. So what does that mean? Does that mean that they're doing really well and that the economy's great and everyone's happy? Yes. No, it doesn't. No. First of all, even if Fallout was a regular old formalized capitalist economy like we have in most of the Western world today, 0% unemployment isn't actually desirable because super low unemployment usually leads to higher inflation and labor shortages. We're not going to get into macroecon today, but you can just go ahead and Google that if you want. But the bigger issue here is that Fallout isn't a formalized capitalist economy, which means that measuring the unemployment rate is basically useless. Let me back up a little bit. We, meaning the United States of America, created the formal unemployment measurement in the 1930s and 40s in response to the Great Depression, because this really smart guy who also had polio rightfully understood that in order to do anything to help his fellow citizens, he first needed good data. Incredibly based perspective to have. So he helped put together a big giant one-time survey of the entire country in order to get a sense of how bad the economic situation was and to start to come up with a plan for how to deal with it. A direct survey, you might say. Now that survey that they did, it was a one-time survey, but it formed the basis of what eventually became the unemployment surveys done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a crucial tool for helping mitigate economic disasters to this day. The point is that understanding who has a job and who doesn't have a job is a useful piece of information for understanding the well-being of your citizens. It's not a catch-all. It has plenty of flaws. Not everyone with a job is doing great. We've seen that plenty of times.
Oh, I can't feel the warmth anymore.
But it is a high-quality piece of information from which you can start to piece together the reality. In Fallout, that's just not the case.
What did Pelibot say? Whoa, Dream Den. Let's go, Dream Den. Isn't that... The Dream Den. That's from Pikmin. Oh, okay. I'm thinking of like the memory... Fallout... Is it the Memory Den? The Memory Den, not the Dream Den. Okay. Thought that was like... That was weirdly like on topic.
Employment rate is a thing that's specifically helpful for the circumstance that we are in, which is a particular type of economy, right? Everyone in New Vegas has a job, and it sucks shit to live in New Vegas. It's really bad. So being able to say New Vegas has a 0% unemployment rate isn't helpful for understanding how things are going, and that's something that we constantly forget. Statistics are not normatively loaded. They're only as useful as the quality of the understanding that you have of their context. I sound like a social studies teacher. Now, the obvious question that I have then becomes this. If the unemployment rate's not helpful for determining how good things are in New Vegas, what would be helpful? If you were the president of New Vegas and if you had polio, what kind of data would you want to gather in order to understand how how life was going for your citizens? You know, maybe you'd want to do a survey about how each area provides for its own safety in order to understand how you might incentivize cooperation to create stability, or maybe a survey about like how much downtime the different people in the different regions have, so that then you can pinpoint which places need the most help, you know, providing for their own basic survival, which would then let you allocate resources more effectively, which is the, you know, in theory, should be the point of an unemployment survey also. But that's the question, right? What would a helpful survey of the citizens of New Vegas actually look like? If you have any ideas for what that survey might be, post them down in the comments. Maybe we could start a whole new series of videos about, you know, we could call it what FDR would do if he was in charge of video games. That'd be pretty cool. I'm not FDR. I'm Any Austin, and thanks for watching.
Everybody likes me, everybody likes me, everybody likes me.
Oh shoot, hang on. I hope this doesn't get DMC. He's gonna know. He's gonna know that I just like played his video on my stream. Yeah, so that was what is Fallout New Vegas's unemployment rate by Any Austin. That came out 4 days ago, and I've been saving it to listen to on stream. Let's check out the Fallout 3 one.
Like to try to find a job in the hit 2008 video game Fallout 3? I have. The world of Fallout 3 has been totally obliterated by nuclear weapons, and it's been taken over by roving gangs of jerks. But there's still some semblance of an organized economy, at least in the major settlements, and if you were looking for work in this world, those major settlements are exactly where you'd want to be. So you basically have two good options. You can either live in Rivet City, a city built inside the hulking ruins of an aircraft carrier, or you could live in Megaton, a settlement inside of a big hole surrounded by trash. Both places have a standardized currency called caps, and they have some variety of available industries to work in, but which one is doing better overall? How's the unemployment rate in each place? How diversified is the economy? What's the GDP? Is it even possible to calculate these things? You're also going to be looking at lots of graphs and at least one table, and maybe this spreadsheet at least once. Let's start by talking about Megaton. Megaton is a city that seems to have been built inside the crater of an unexploded nuclear bomb, and its population seems largely made up of people who either currently or previously worked out in the nuclear wasteland as sort of mercenaries or as part of trade caravans. It's kind of a backwater Wild West sort of place with an every man for themselves philosophy that's gradually transitioning into being a more stable and steady community. The population of Megaton is approximately 32. 25% of these people are unnamed settlers, people who seem to be newer to the community and haven't found solid footing yet. 12.5% of the population are devotees to a local church, which seems like a pretty big group, but the rest of them seem to be more permanently settled individuals who either have obvious jobs or have homes and roles, etc., etc. Let's take a look at the age demographic breakdown. Nearly 70% of the population is of working age, a quarter of the population is old, and just 6% are children. The most notable figure of those is going to be the 25% of people who are old, so let's keep that in the back of our mind as we proceed. Wouldn't it be great if you could do this type of extensive, self-motivated research on every single topic that's important to you in the real world? Yes, it would, but it's just not practical. So what do we do instead? Well, we just consume headlines or posts via algorithms, which is sort of decaying our ability to to recognize and contextualize the truth. The annoying thing about what I'm saying right now is I'm using it to segue into an ad read for Ground News, which makes it seem like I don't actually believe it, and I just wrote it as a segue, but I do. It's also true. You can be getting paid and be telling the truth at the same time. I know it seems impossible. I think Ground News offers a reasonable solution to that problem, or at the very least, a big step in the right direction. Ground News is a service that takes news stories that are being reported by multiple outlets, it gathers them up in one place, and then clearly reports the potential biases for each outlet, as well as summarizing the differences in how each outlet is reporting on the same fundamental set of facts. You can see why this is appealing to me. It's impossible to get into all the little details of why this is so helpful in a single ad read, but let me just highlight one of their features right now to try and show you some of what's so great about it. They have this thing called the blind spot feature, which is a thing they use to very clearly demarcate stories that have been ignored by one side of the political spectrum in order to help fill out your awareness. Yes, I understand. Okay, the political binary is not perfectly illustrative of our society and so on and so on, but the blind spot feature really does work to help you hear about things you wouldn't have otherwise heard about. For example, why isn't the left-leaning media reporting on how many Macy's stores are closing? Or perhaps even more amusingly, why isn't the right-leaning media reporting on how nuclear bunkers probably aren't that effective? You can think to yourself maybe why those things might be occurring. Just having that tiny extra little bit of context about which type of outlets are covering what type of stories really helps you take a step back and see the media landscape as a whole thing, rather than just engaging with each individual story at face value. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a great tool. Go to groundnews.com/AnnieAustin or scan the QR code on the screen to subscribe and save 50% on their top-tier Vantage plan, which brings the cost down to less than $5 a month. They also do offer cheaper plans, and they offer like a limited set of articles for free if you want to play around with it and see if it seems like a good fit for you. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but I like it, so obviously I want you to try it and buy it and use my promo code. Where were we? Right, so we talked about Megaton. Now let's talk about Rivet City. Rivet City is larger than Megaton with a total population of 39. Let's take a look at the demographic makeup of Rivet City. You'll notice a significantly higher portion of the population is working age, and significantly fewer people are old. Here's the Megaton breakdown for comparison. While it's hard to say exactly why this might be the case without digging further into the details of each city, what this does tell us is that life expectancy in Megaton may be higher than it is in Rivet City, and it may indicate that Megaton's ability to take care of an aging population is greater. We'll keep that in mind as we continue forward. For comparison, I've broken down the age demographics of the United States of America into roughly the same groups and displayed it in the same format. Notice how Rivet City overall has a bloated working age demographic, but Megaton has a bloated population of old people. Both situations can present a variety of challenges socioeconomically that we won't be getting into today, but you can think to yourself maybe what things may be strained in each circumstance. With demographics in mind, but out of the way, we have this big question of economics. How are the local economies doing? Well, the first thing I did was perform a full and complete direct survey of everyone in each settlement to determine the unemployment rate. In some ways, this was pretty easy. Lots of people are forthright with their employment, like Moira Brown, who runs the shop in Megaton, or Gary and Angela Staley, who have a little restaurant in Rivet City. Both places also have spiritual leaders, which we consider employment, as well as doctors and trades workers who repair people and machinery, respectively. Rivet City also has lots of unnamed uniformed security personnel. I counted 7 in my survey, but I admit I could be off by 1 or 2. Everyone else in Rivet City has like a permanent named position, so it was fairly simple to determine their employment status. Megaton, on the other hand, introduced some complexity and really tested our methodology.
All this stuff is here.
Employed if they have a job, right? But we only consider someone unemployed if they don't have a job and they want a job. It's not enough to just not have a job. For example, if you're well off and you don't need a job to provide for yourself, you're not considered unemployed. You're considered not applicable. Children are not applicable. Really old people are not applicable. Where this gets complicated is with the 2 populations we briefly touched on earlier. You have those devotees of the local religion, and then the unnamed settlers who just wander around every day. There's no way to actually ask these people if they want a job, so it's pretty tough to determine whether they qualify as being truly unemployed. When it comes to the religious people, they basically seem to live inside the church, which I believe implies that they're being cared for by the church. Because their economic needs are being met, I'm going to consider them not applicable rather than unemployed. The unnamed settlers don't have as good of an excuse not to be working, and in fact, I followed some of them around for a few days and I heard one of them say something to the effect of how they didn't have enough money to afford food to eat.
Can't even afford some damn squirrel stew.
This, to me, clearly implies that they want a job or at least money, and so I was leaning towards counting all these people as unemployed. However, unfortunately, I found this guy hanging out near the entrance of the town. This guy is clearly employed. So there's got to be some nuance to this. I mean, what do these people do all day, right? If you follow these people around, these unnamed, unemployed interlopers, they spend their days just wandering. Occasionally they sit down, sometimes they rest in the common house. They do eat every so often, so they must get hungry. They stand to listen to the sermon from the fanatical priest, so they must have some desire to belong. In some ways, their job in this world is to remain jobless. That's philosophy, though. We're doing data. What I decided is that the farming gentleman is employed, and that this other guy who has a gun and he eats at this restaurant is also employed, because he just kind of seems like he has his life put together. But the rest of these settlers, I'm counting all of them as unemployed. The only other minor conundrum in Megaton was Lucy here. Lucy clearly isn't employed, and she spends her days walking around and drinking at the saloon, but she owns quite a large home and doesn't really want for much, so we're going to consider her not applicable. Which means that altogether, Megaton has an unemployment rate of 26.1%. If you're thinking to yourself, that seems pretty high, you are correct. I think the US unemployment rate right now is like 4%, that's where you want it. Remember, the unemployment rate is just the number of people unemployed divided by the total size of the workforce, which does not include the not applicable category, meaning you have 6 unemployed people out of a total 23 persons, giving us this number. Rivet City's unemployment was a little more straightforward, as I said. The only 2 people I found that I could reasonably consider unemployed were Tammy Hargrave, who is a raging alcoholic that doesn't do anything except drink and yell at her kid.
James's mom, Tammy, is a real bitch.
And Trini, a newer resident of Rivet City who doesn't do anything but drink and steal drugs from the pharmacy. Again, both of these people satisfy the conditions we set forth before of being in a position where it could be reasonably assumed that they would prefer to have a stable source of income based on the way they're behaving, even though they don't technically actually say, I want a job. For contrast, let's take a look at this guy. His name is Ted Strayer. Ted also doesn't have an explicit job, and he does seem to have a drug addiction, but his demeanor and general outlook on life is fairly positive and unconcerned.
Whoa. What's the rush, dude?
Which makes it more likely that he's not in as immediate need for work, and therefore we're considering him not applicable. In previous surveys we've often considered anyone who appeared to live on the street or to have a substance abuse issue to be unemployed if they didn't explicitly have a job. In hindsight, the Bureau of Labor Statistics considers that judgment to have been a little imprecise and unempathetic, so we're striving to improve our assessments going forward, and this is an example of that. Overall, we've calculated Rivet City to have an unemployment rate of 9.4%. When you look at this, you look at these two, it's easy to say, wow, Rivet City better than Megaton. But it's important to remember that this data isn't inherently normatively loaded or loaded. It would just be loaded. It's just an annoying way of saying that it's just data. We can draw conclusions from it if we want, and that's what data is good for, but those conclusions aren't inherent to it. You know, we can conclude that a 9.4% unemployment rate is better than a 26.1% unemployment rate, but that's a conclusion that we're drawing. It's not a given, okay? Let's absorb this data into our analysis and then take a look at some more. Another thing we cataloged during our census is which industry each person worked in. Things like shopkeeper, medicine, maintenance, etc. The categories we used were made by me, so they aren't like objective, but they'll shed some more light on the economic situation here. Let's take a look at Megaton first. It's interesting that hospitality, that is people working in bars or restaurants, make up the plurality of workers in Megaton, but overall, it's a pretty good mix. Obviously, with a population as small as it is, when you see 5% of workers are in the medical field, that literally just means there's one guy working in the medical field, but you know, it is what it is. Interestingly, the one person working in agriculture is that unnamed settler who hangs out with the cow, and the one person working in shipping and trade is Mr. Billy Creel, who could maybe be considered a mercenary because he's working as a caravan guard, but he specifically talks about how his work allows the businesses in Megaton to stay supplied.
Helps keep the town supplied.
So I decided to consider him more of a shipping and tradesman. Not tradesman, whatever. I don't have to get all the words right, okay? Just like 80%. The two things that I want you to hold on from this graph as we switch to Rivet Cities are the categories of law enforcement and mercenary, which account for 10 and 15% of the employment in Megaton respectively. Okay, let's switch. Law enforcement in Rivet City takes up 31% of the workforce, and I'm pretty sure we're actually underestimating that a little bit. That's a lot of cops. I guess there's a reason why they say it's the safest place in the wasteland.
We're the safest, most secure city in the wasteland.
If you were to extrapolate that to a per capita number that we could compare to the United States of America, that would be the equivalent of 31,000 cops per 100 residents. For reference, the city with the most cops in all of the US of A is Washington, D.C., which makes sense, and it has 543 officers per 100,000 residents. Yes, you heard that right. Rivet City has 57 times the number of cops as the most policed city in all of the United States, which ironically is the city that Rivet City is located in. Like literally, Rivet City it's in post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C. Kind of funny. I wonder if they thought about that.
We're the safest, most secure city in the wasteland.
Speaking of being set in Washington, D.C., technically, because Fallout 3 is near the U.S. Capitol, that means that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the government organization responsible for surveying and consolidating data about labor in the United States, should be canon in the Fallout universe, given that it was founded in 1884, and the Fallout universe didn't diverge from our own until the 1940s. I wonder if we could locate the Bureau of Labor Statistics within Fallout 3. In real life, the Bureau is located near Union Station, a large passenger rail depot in Washington, D.C. Conveniently, this is almost at exactly the 90-degree meeting point if you draw lines directly north from the U.S. Capitol and directly east from the White House. So if we use the same strategy to triangulate its position in Fallout 3 using the game's representation of the U.S. Capitol and the White House, we would end up here. Interestingly, the game also has a large train station here called Metro Central, but it's likely modeled after the real-life Metro Center, which is not the same as Union Station, which is the train depot located here in real life. If you're not following, just close your eyes, we'll be done soon. That said, if we take some artistic liberties and see the game's Metro Central as an amalgamation for both real life's Metro Center and real life's Union Station, we could use that to estimate with some degree of accuracy the location of the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Fallout 3, which can then be determined to be most likely either this building or this building. If you're keeping score, this is, in fact, the third video in the last 12 months in which we've discussed Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, and the second video in the last 12 months in which we've spent some portion of time trying to locate a digital representation of the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm Manny Austin, and thanks for watching indeed. One other major difference I want to draw between the industries in both of these locations is in the science and academics field. Megaton has 0 people working in this industry. Most of Megaton's labor is spent on things that are lower on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like providing safe drinking water, food, and shelter to its citizens, whereas Rivet City, though it's obviously more of a police state with probably more wealth inequality, has enough resource access to allow some of its citizens to do research on bettering the world or to maintain museums of culture. Neither of these situations is inherently better or worse, but it's a distinct difference. The very last piece of data I want to include here before we make a final decision on which place would be a better place to find a job is the GDP, the gross domestic product. This is one of those phrases that people on TV say to help justify all the wealth inequality we have in America, but it also is a real thing. Like, it's a thing that has some informational value. It basically just means the monetary value of everything we make in a whole year. So like, imagine if we took everyone in Megaton and added up the cost of all the food and the drinks they made, all the toys they sold, all the services they provided, etc. for a whole year. That would be GDP. Now that I say that out loud, I have no idea how they calculate the GDP in America. How would you even begin? Calculating the actual GDP in a video game is kind of dumb and maybe impossible, so what I've decided to do instead is just add up the value of every single item in every single shop and all the money that every vendor has on hand in both of these towns and consider that the equivalent of GDP. It's not perfect, but as a way of comparing two separate places, it should illuminate some interesting facts for us. Megaton has 4 vending establishments, which altogether have a combined value of 10,765 caps. Caps are the currency in the game. I don't know if I mentioned that already. Rivet City, unsurprisingly, given that it's a bigger place, has a slightly higher GDP of 14,317 caps spread across 6 vendors. If you take those numbers and divide it by the total population, we can get the GDP per capita, which is another important figure of economic health. Megaton's GDP per capita then would be 336 caps, where Rivet City's is 358 caps. However, you know where your parents always told you to find the devil, right? He's in the details. Or they're in the, I should say they, we don't really know. The devil is they, them. Anyway, some of the details in Megaton are a little fishy. If you head down to Craterside Supply, which is the general goods store in Megaton, you'll find that shop owner Moira Brown is selling a few items at a ridiculously high price, including blueprints for weapons and furniture. These items are worth over 1,000 caps each and are dramatically more expensive than anything else available, which leads me to believe that they might be artificially inflated for some reason. If you remove just that handful of ludicrously expensive items from her shop, Megaton's, this is not a joke, Megaton's total GDP drops by a staggering 6,000 caps, bringing its GDP per capita down to 151. Yikes. So where does that leave us here? Which place is better? Well, between a significantly lower unemployment rate, a more diversified economy, and a significantly higher GDP per capita, there's no question that strictly economically speaking, Rivet City is where you would want to go if you were looking for a job in Fallout 3. People there literally talk about how they need more people willing and able to work.
This place could use a few more people willing to work.
But you know, economics it isn't everything. It's a lot, but it isn't everything. If you moved to Rivet City, you'd also have to contend with living in a dark metal box with less opportunity for fresh air. You'd also be living right on the edge of an incredibly violent war zone of Washington, D.C., meaning traveling would be extremely dangerous. And sure, that location may then explain the overwhelming security force in the city, but you'd also have to be okay living in a police state. That kind of protection does often come with significant trade-offs. Also, let's not forget that, for whatever reason, Megaton does have a higher population of older folks, and it does manage to sustain a fairly large population of the unemployed. In fact, one of the few old folks there are in Rivet City is literally thinking about hurling himself off a cliff because he feels his life has no meaning.
I wish I had the courage to end it all.
Perhaps that's a good indicator that Megaton's social services, or I guess at the very least the human generosity of its citizens, is in a better place than Rivet City. So, you know, the point is, data is amazing, and sometimes I think it's the only fundamental truth in this confusing and difficult world. But at the end of the day, you are a human being. You're not a data machine. You're a vibes machine, and you have to take vibes into account as well, especially when deciding where to move. So, you know, just keep that in mind. But personally, I would move to Rivet City because I like things that are depressing.
I wish I had the courage to end.
I'm Annie Austin. Thanks for watching.
Alright, so that was Finding a Job in Fallout 3's Post-Apocalyptic Economy by Annie Austin. Trying to see what the guys are up to, because I got work tomorrow. I can't be up too late. I haven't seen this one yet.
Look at this map of Hyrule and tell me what you see. I'm just kidding. I'm going to tell you what I see. I see a bunch of rivers, and no matter how hard I look, none of them, and I mean none of them, connect in any way to the ocean. Have you ever noticed that? I'm serious. There's tons of water in this game, but every place on the edge of the map that looks like it might be the end of a river, it's not. Not this place, not this place, not that place, or this place. This is an interesting question because all of this water has to go somewhere. Even if it just goes off the map or disappears, there will be an end to it. But if it doesn't go to the ocean, where does it go? And maybe more interestingly, how does it go? Figuring out the answers to those questions is simple. We're going to find a river and follow it all the way from where it begins to where it ends, mapping out every pond, lake, stream, and other river that touches it, as well as marking which direction each one flows and how they all connect, and also how the landscape has changed from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom, and maybe just for fun, whether or not any of this has its roots in real-world hydrology. It's gonna be easy. Let's begin with a quick science fact, shall we? Did you know stalactites like this are usually formed via a multi-step process involving rainwater mixing with carbon dioxide to make a gentle acid that dissolves limestone and carries it down through the soil, through the ceiling of a cave, depositing that same limestone into a dripping shape that gradually builds up over time? I learned that on the internet. But if I use ExpressVPN, now nobody knows who learned it on the internet. I'm anonymous. Welcome to the sponsorship. If you're not aware, a VPN is a virtual private network. It's a multi-use tool that's primarily used to obfuscate your browsing data from the prying eyes of your internet service provider or the government or unsavory crooks and criminals. Let's imagine a world where James Cameron has his own streaming service called James Cameron Plus, and for some reason it also has all the Matrix movies, but they're only available in India. Even if I live in India, how would I watch the Matrix movies while traveling abroad, which I always do while traveling abroad? Thankfully, ExpressVPN has my back because it allows me to change my location so it looks like I'm in India, which means now I can access the content I'm paying for, including The Matrix, The Matrix Reloaded, The But Austin, if you use a VPN, that just means the VPN company knows that you were looking up stalactite facts instead of your ISP knowing that you were looking up stalactite facts. Wrong. ExpressVPN does not and in fact cannot keep logs of your browsing data because their servers are built to run exclusively on RAM. I don't really know what that means because I'm not a nerd, but it sounds pretty good to me. Go to expressvpn.com/AnyAustin to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN free. Easy. The link below if you're interested. Thanks everyone. Thank you ExpressVPN. Now, where should we start this river mapping journey? I think we're going to start on top of the Great Plateau because the map at least makes it look like a really strong candidate for creating a long ocean-bound river that will flow for miles and miles without stopping, and that should make for a nice easy journey. Looking downstream across the map, it's clear that it won't be the simplest river diagram that we've ever constructed, but at least starting all the way at the beginning will help make things a little bit more straightforward. Okay, welcome to the start of this river right here next to this funny little cave. We're going to be using this raft like Huckleberry Finn to go basically just to follow the river all the way down to wherever it goes, including, it looks like, over a gigantic waterfall, which is fine. Now, in order to keep track of all these places that we're going to be making a river diagram, just like we did for Skyrim. And that diagram is going to be built with a long straight line in the middle just to represent the main path of the river. And then we're going to use a variety of symbols like these to denote different hydrological features. So you'll note that we've gone over a waterfall and into a lake. And it looks like we're going over another waterfall, presumably into another gigantic lake. Oh, this is a big waterfall. Jesus. Oh. After taking myself over 2 different waterfalls, eventually I ended up in this very deep canyon with a deep, almost eerie lake at the bottom of it. The flow of the river had already come to a halt, which isn't necessarily a huge problem, but it does mean that we have to circumnavigate the lake in order to figure out where the next part of the river branches off. Coming around to the north side, there's a waterfall flowing into the lake. Then there's another one from the west also flowing into this lake. Add to that the one we came in on, and that's 3 waterfalls all flowing into the lake and nothing flowing out of it. Now, if a lake has 3 rivers flowing into it and no rivers flowing out of it, then that lake is the endpoint of those river systems. So it's entirely possible that we found the answer to our question already. Every river you've ever seen in this game might just dump itself into this weird, dark, shadowy lake. But something about that doesn't feel quite right. This map is riddled with water features, and I'm not comfortable saying that this is Hyrule's aquatic dump zone until I know for sure. And there's only one way to find that out. We'll tackle the waterfall coming in from the west first, because it looks like that one doesn't actually go anywhere, so we should be able to just head to the top, take a look, and then mark it down. One of my biggest curiosities for this game was how it decides to handle what we call randomly spawning waterfalls, which are a necessity for any video game's hydrology. Skyrim would just have water like materializing out the side of a flat texture, and previous Zelda games, for example Twilight Princess, they had really strange, these really weird, ugly spouts of water built into the cliff sides, so I'm very curious if this game does the same. Oh ho ho! Look at this! This waterfall is fed by a cave. It's not even a trick. I mean, it's probably a trick once we actually look back into it, but who would have thought? This introduces another interesting wrinkle. Tears of the Kingdom, as most people know, is a direct sequel to 2017's Breath of the Wild, and it reuses the same broad strokes geography of that older game while adding a variety of new locations, towns, and features like floating islands and giant underground demon land. One of the biggest and most consequential additions to this game, at least in my opinion, are the caves. Breath of the Wild, the first game, did not have caves. So what you're looking at right here could not have existed in Breath of the Wild. And following these rivers in the sequel is going to highlight for us one of the main ways Nintendo utilized those new caves.
Skeleton level 3!
They used them as underground rivers that connect 2 disparate bodies of water. So when we look at this giant map and all of these unconnected rivers and lakes, suddenly things aren't so clear anymore because these 2 spots are actually connected, even though at first glance they didn't look like they were. This also means that anytime we see a body of water in Tears of the Kingdom that's fed by a cave, like this one, that body of water either just didn't exist at all in Breath of the Wild, or they had some sort of alternative solution to where it was sourced from. I'll do my best anytime there's an interesting example of this. I'll be sure to show you a side-by-side comparison, but first, let's just get this little tributary mapped out, and then we'll come back and do that. This river goes through the cave, up a series of really lovely little stair-like waterfalls, and is ultimately fed by another waterfall that itself causes a separate small creek to form heading in the opposite direction. That creek just sort of peters out into this odd and unremarkable little corner here, but if you follow that waterfall up, you will find yet another cave from which this river is ultimately fed. Inside that cave is a large space. Notice how the water is also clearly made to just flow straight and doesn't actually animate around the little island in the center of it all. Also, if you wander too far, you'll end up facing a stone talus, which is no big deal if you've played the game as much as I have. Very funny, Austin. Very funny. Now, as we said, all of this really does beg the question. If this entire river system that we just looked at is sourced from caves, and caves did not exist in the map when it was originally made in 2017's Breath of the Wild, where were these rivers sourced back then? The answer is really, really neat. They weren't. The waterfall going into the lake just didn't exist. The riverbed flowing in step-like fashion was just a smooth dirt path. There was no additional waterfall, no cave, nothing. The vibe of this area is so different from one game to the next that my brain didn't honestly recognize it as the same place at first glance. Another point of interest for this tributary is that this river flows through a canyon that, if you look on the map, looks like it was clearly carved by water at some point in the past. So in some ways, you could almost see Tears of the Kingdom as just a different state of seasons for Hyrule. Also consider the fact that a lot of the smaller bodies of water around here, like Spectacle Rock, have dried up significantly since the previous game in the series. Is it possible that some sort of lowercase c climate change, don't get worked up, has caused these ponds to dry up, and also maybe created record snowmelt in the Gerudo Highlands, which seeped into the groundwater, eventually cutting a path for itself down to the lake that we came from? I have no idea. I'm not a hydrologist, by the way. Always be sure to look down in the top comments, because usually someone with way more knowledge than me will have corrected all the stuff I said wrong. So you shouldn't believe comments, but you definitely shouldn't believe YouTubers. We don't know what we're talking about. Now, with that small tributary marked down, we can start tracing the main river back to its source. Up the waterfall on the north side of the lake, we end up in another valley, but it's a little tough to tell which way the water is actually flowing here. Sort of funny, considering how there's a gigantic waterfall right there, but hey, you know, they did their best. Following this valley backwards, we run into another offshoot creek, which is downstream of us rather than upstream. It's not overly complicated, and it just flows into this big lake that surrounds the Colosseum there, sort of splitting around the sides of it. A little further upstream, we run into this. The Sage Temple ruins, just off the right-hand side here, are flatlands so low to the water table that they are flooded, but they do have ruins built onto them, which means at some point in the past they weren't flooded. As we travel further upstream, we're going to see a lot of these low-lying areas that are either actively flooding or clearly at risk of flooding, which sort of indicates that a lot of the center of Hyrule is what we might call a floodplain. There are some pretty stunning photographs from James Stanfield for National Geographic of some floodplains in Mongolia that bear a striking resemblance to some places you might find in this iteration of Hyrule. Floodplains like this are often carved up by the rising and falling rivers, which, if you look at the map at the center of Hyrule here, makes a lot of sense. It really does sort of look like it was carved up in all sorts of ways over many years. Coming up past these ruins, we have another pretty sizable river that flows westward to the heart of Satori Mountain. This one seems weird to me because while the flow is pretty weak, it does flow from east to west. But this channel is at the heart of a really large, really snowy mountain. And if our earlier conjecture was true, then you'd think that snow would have melted off to create this channel flowing from west to meet the larger river back to the east. When you follow this river back to its source, you even see an underground river inside of a cave that's been cut off from the main river, presumably due to drought. To me, this screams snow melt and underground channeling caused a river to form, as we all are always screaming. But according to the game, this is the downstream cave. So it even says in the game, this is downstream. Even more baffling is that if you go into that cave, you can literally see groundwater dripping out of the ceiling. So the tools are all there. Maybe they just named it wrong. But this is going to be one of many weird examples of Nintendo either doing things that are extremely nuanced and hydrologically impressive, or really, really weird and hard to explain, which is honestly exactly what you want out of a video game. Speaking of weird things, further upriver, things are fairly straightforward until we hit Hyrule Castle. The river gets really strong right around here, presumably due to evil goblin magic or, you know, whatever, and it splits off into loads of weird directions, forming a sort of moat around the castle. This is where the complexity of this task really started to hit me. Wait, but then this goes out here? How is that? Okay, so this flows here, or does it? It's like every single river is connected, almost. That's what it feels like. I think literally every single river is connected to everything else. So mapping one river necessitates that I map the entire game. The biggest piece of confusion is right here. Why does the river split off and go south from the castle at all? I can't think of a good explanation. The best thing I could guess is that this means that this moat was actually man-made, because a dramatic bifurcation like this is not very common in real rivers. We'll come back to that in a moment. And past the castle, further upriver, we end up at yet another fork in the river where it bifurcates southward and heads towards Lake Hylia. Also, I keep saying this word, bifurcate. I know it sounds like I just knew that word on account of being very intelligent, but I didn't. I had to learn it for this video. It's a very important word when you're talking about rivers. A bifurcation is a point where a river splits off into two rivers that then both continue downstream to their own separate destinations. It's similar, but the inverse of the word confluence, where two rivers join up to go to the same place. From what I can tell, confluences are extremely common in real life, but bifurcations are pretty rare. Look at this map of the Mississippi River Basin. How many confluences do you see? Is it 3 trillion? Yeah. How many bifurcations do you see? Turns out, maybe one. Right down here all the way at the bottom. And while it's technically a bifurcation of the Mississippi River, I read an article about how this split is only maintained due to the hubris of the Army Corps of Engineers, and that in fact the Atchafalaya Basin is actually where the Mississippi would be
can I not
if
chill
allowed
here,
to
'cause
run
it's
its
not-
natural course.
Oh,
So
I
even
actually
this
can't
example
wait
is a
here.
little rickety. And this does tend to be how bifurcations evolve. They are only semi-permanent, and over time, as illustrated here, the river will gradually show preference to whichever side is deeper or steeper as it carves its path. Thinking back over what we've surveyed so far, there have actually been 2 other inexplicable bifurcations, which indicates that either the land of Hyrule is full of rivers that are just about to change course, or that it's a video game and Nintendo did not in fact remember to hire the required team of PhD hydrologists before making it. I'll have to check the credits. Maybe they're in there. Now, here's my hot Zelda lore take. Not like that. I think there's a chance that the entire western portion of this river basin was caused unintentionally by the royal family wanting to dig a moat for their castle, and it got totally out of control. Like those TikTok videos of people digging trenches between streams and the ocean that rapidly turn into insanely dangerous whitewater rapids and probably damage the ecology somehow. I mean, if this can happen in 2 minutes from a hand-dug trench, imagine the chaos that would be caused if you machined a huge moat for a major river to flow through. The government is to blame, as usual. And believe it or not, this isn't even the only instance where I think human intervention may be drastically reshaping the landscape of Hyrule.
I need to
In order
actually,
to
like,
show you that,
build
though,
one
first
of
we have to
these.
map out the rest of this bit. All right, so should I follow this downstream, or should I follow it upstream to where it actually begins?
I don't
I
think
guess let's
so.
follow- but then I gotta go all the way over into there. All right, well, let's follow this downstream first, I guess, because that's gonna take the longest. At least this river's fast. There's a lot to see down this way, including an interesting divide between the shores where one side is totally green and the other side is muddy and rocky. I'm not sure what that might be about, but it's interesting. Hydrologists in the comments, let me know. On the right here is a fascinating little alcove with the remains of some sort of house or cabin, perhaps the first sign of civilization having to retreat from the unsuitable habitat. Honestly, I wonder if this was here in Breath of the Wild, or if it was like a regular house that then decayed in Tears of the Kingdom. Let me go grab my Switch.
The house is still here in Breath of the Wild, as you can see, which is interesting because you would think something that's that decayed, if it had flooded a lot.
Why isn't that one
in
showing up on the map?
years, you
Am I
think something
crazy?
like this wouldn't have held up, but look at that wood. That's a good wood texture right there.
Okay, so it's a little bit of mixed environmental messaging, also known as classic video game beauty. Hey, check this out.
It is. I
Another
just misread the
bifurcation.
symbol.
Let's pull up the map and look at something neat here. This river goes this way, and it goes this way. The way on the right here goes into what looks like a lake at first glance, but this lake was clearly, at one point, connected downstream. You can see it just in the topography. You can almost see the historical shoreline along the edge of the hill and the mountainside. Now, knowing what we talked about earlier, how generally when rivers split off like this, one side usually captures the river over time and becomes the only surviving branch, Nintendo may have accidentally done a great little in-progress representation of this here. We can mark all of that down like
There's
this. And we
danger
can also
nearby?
mark down
Who
another
put this
tributary,
here?
which is coming in from the east past the Dueling Peaks, which from what we can see also has its own various tributaries and multiple sources for the water. The endpoint of the main river is in Lake Hylia. That much is obvious from the map, but I have a sneaking suspicion that there's some very interesting stuff happening down there hydrologically.
Oh, what the hell is that?
So before we get to that, let's just knock out this new tributary to the east, shall we? The land here, like so much of Hyrule, is just really wet. Hateno Village carved itself out a little living space on the eastern end of the basin, and the main mouth of the river is just a few hundred feet down the side, down the side of the hill in a small lake. The waterfall coming out of the side of the mountain is adorned with a large hole to help sort of elevate its hydrological believability, but ultimately this is really the Hyrule equivalent of our magic waterfalls at Skyrim. The other offshoot creek on this river also spawns from the side of a rock face, though with a much tighter opening that reminded me of those blood pressure testing machines you could play with as a kid at the grocery store. You guys ever play with those? No? I do have an appreciation for this extra detail that Nintendo sort of notched into the sources of streams here, but I can't quite tell whether I prefer this thoughtfulness or the slightly surreal disinterest that Skyrim uses as a solution for the same problem. Both definitely have their merits. Okay, as of now, our diagram looks like this. And we only have 2 more unexplored branches. Each of these branches could very well have multiple branches of their own, and I'm starting to fear that this hole we're digging is less of a hole and more of a hydrological fractal. It just keeps going, but we're in too deep at this point to stop. And plus, I'm committed to creating an animation at the end of this showing the flow of the entire river system from source to mouth, and I can't do that if I give up at this point. Heading back to where we split off most recently, it's finally time to go downriver to Lake Hylia. I'd like to maintain the integrity of the present tense storytelling here, but I will warn you ahead of time. If you thought Lake Hylia was the end of this river just because the map makes it seem like it is, you're in for a rude awakening, bucko, because I'm about to drown you in amateur inferences about the subtleties of digital hydrodynamics.
Right, we should be
right?
good
If that sounds fun
for
to
a
you,
little
I think
bit.
you're going to enjoy my channel. So I do recommend subscribing and potentially supporting me on Patreon for $3 a month. Also, I bought this really cool map on Etsy for this video, but I don't really need it. So if you comment on this post on my Patreon, I'll pick a random person, I'll ship it to you. Anyway, so this river goes onwards down towards Lake Hylia, dumping into it via another waterfall. Have you noticed that the water in this game never flows at a slope? It can only ever lose altitude by going over a waterfall. I'm serious. Go back and watch the video up to this point. There's not a single time that the water flows at a sloping angle. It's all flat, which is unlike how Skyrim represented its own water systems. There's actually one instance of sloping water in this game that I could find, and I will show it to you later, but see if you can think of where it is. It's kind of obvious once you remember it. Anyway, the main thing that ruins any hope of this river actually ending in this lake is this large, uncontrolled whirlpool that is draining all of the water from the lake to who knows where. You can go into that whirlpool, and it leads into a large cavern into which approximately 10,000 cubic feet of water is flowing every single second. I say approximately because I got that number by taking the 700,000 cubic feet of water that flows through the Mississippi River every second and just sort of eyeballing the size difference between the Mississippi and this gushing hole. I will remind you again that I'm not a scientist. This cave could have been the end of the line for all of this water, but unfortunately, while looking back over some of the footage I took, I noticed something on the map. Cora Lake. Cora Lake is a deep blue color, which makes it look lower in elevation than the water in Lake Hylia, and that visual cue tricked my brain into thinking that Cora Lake kind of looked like a spot with high potential to be the actual outlet of Lake Hylia. Unfortunately for us, the facts on the ground here paint a pretty grim picture of the future of this part of Hyrule. Dun dun dun. If we compare the maps of Hyrule between 2017's Breath of the Wild and 2023's Tears of the Kingdom, it's clear that the land here has changed pretty dramatically. First of all, this channel has opened up underneath Lake Hylia, and it's taking quite a bit of water, which over time will cause that opening to widen, causing it to take more water, causing it to widen even faster, and so on and so on and so on. This will cause the ground underneath to become more saturated, weakening its structural integrity and eventually creating things like new cave systems and sinkholes. It's also possible that the entirety of Lake Hylia will collapse in on itself, which is similar to what happened at Lake Peigney in Louisiana in 1980, where a drilling company this is a true story, a drilling company accidentally penetrated a salt mine that was underneath a lake bed and caused the entire lake to drain into the mine shafts, which eventually caused the whole lake to collapse in on itself, creating a gigantic, gargantuan whirlpool that sucked up entire barges and temporarily created the tallest waterfall in Louisiana of all time. A giant whirlpool under a lake draining into a cave system. Sound familiar? The consequences of this drainage are evident.
You have room for a little more. There's something I want to give you.
Ooh, chiral boots, cool. What was this?
to widen, causing it to take more water, causing it to the ground here paint a pretty grim picture of the future of this part of Hyrule. Dun dun dun. If we compare the maps of Hyrule between 2017's Breath of the Wild and 2023's Tears of the Kingdom, it's clear that the land here has changed pretty dramatically. First of all, this channel has opened up underneath Lake Hylia, and it's taking quite a bit of water, which over time will cause that opening to widen, causing it to take more water, causing it to widen even faster, and so on and so on and so on. This will cause the ground underneath to become more saturated, weakening its structural integrity and eventually creating things like new cave systems and sinkholes. It's also possible that the entirety of Lake Hylia will collapse in on itself, which is similar to what happened at Lake Peniel in Louisiana in 1980.
Lake. Yeah, okay, this one. Drilling accident. Ah. All right, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Where a drilling company this is a true story, a drilling company accidentally penetrated a salt mine that was underneath a lake bed and caused the entire lake to drain into the mine shafts, which eventually caused the whole lake to collapse in on itself, creating a gigantic gargantuan whirlpool that sucked up entire barges and temporarily created the tallest waterfall in Louisiana of all time. A giant whirlpool under a lake draining into a cave system. Sound familiar? The consequences of this drainage are evident in the surrounding terrain. Cora Lake, the lake that I hypothesize might be the outflow from Lake Hylia, is fed by rapidly flowing groundwater from the direction of Lake Hylia, and in between this point and the lake is a system of clearly unstable and very saturated caves that, you know, to top it all off, it didn't exist 7 years ago during Breath of the Wild. Compare the two maps and you can see how the space between the two is just starting to fall apart. I think there's a good chance that this whole region is going to collapse and drain directly into the bay in the next few years, the consequences of which will require someone with a college degree to fully predict. So yeah, if you're playing Tears of the Kingdom anytime in the next 5 to 10 years, I would avoid this area so that you don't get buried alive in the mud when it all collapses. Also, on a side note, if the ceiling of the depths is 1,400 feet thick, which based on my rough calculations using Earth's terminal velocity and the time it takes to fall down there, it is, how long until all of that just collapses too? How long until Hudson Construction Company becomes Hudson Oil Co. and drills just a little too deep? Okay, the last place we need to map is all the way back up here. Remember where we initially split off from Hyrule Castle? Remember that? This river flows back a ways, and there are lots of fun details along this route, from little docks to small islands to 2 separate bridges we get to go underneath. I told you I like bridges, and this river has 2. It has Ruby Bridges and Jeff Bridges. That was a Ruby Bridges, Jeff Bridges crossover joke. A little bit further up, you can find the Lanairu wetlands, where the river just kind of spills out onto the land more permanently, creating this beautiful, clear environment for lots of different plant and animal life. Also contributing to these wetlands is another lake to the south that used to be a lake, but is now actually 2 lakes connected by a cave. Telta Lake and Lake Ciela in Breath of the Wild were just 2 unremarkable and odd little spots where you could go stand to feel strange feelings for no reason. But in Tears of the Kingdom, like we saw earlier, Nintendo has connected the 2 by a long underground river. That river is ultimately fed by this point, water generating out the side of a mountain. And again, there's just a little notch there to show where it's really flowing from. Going back further is this winding stream that's been carved into the mountainside.
Oh,
this
what's going on,
stream is
Tommy?
lined with little water features like splotchy ponds and small spawning waterfalls, and eventually it opens back into the lake that follows the waterfall.
You looking to do something soon?
The large city of fish people called
Any
Zora's
chance?
Domain. Zora's Domain is a very weird place hydrologically, with waterfalls in 3 places around it, replenishing its reservoir, and at the top of these waterfalls are some sort of strange paper shredder looking structures out of which the water pours. No matter how hard I think, I really could not come up with a great explanation for how this could possibly be functioning, which goes back to what I was saying, that these games seem to either have absolutely incredible, subtle, fascinating displays of hydrology, or
Oops,
just
I did
straight
forget
up
to go get
wizard
that
magic. I also
Hyrule
found
crystal
this in
deposit
Zora's Domain, which is the
earlier.
closest equivalent to that wonderful point we located in Skyrim where water seems to just spawn.
Take a closer look.
I'm gonna get you out of here, bud.
Looks like they're secure. Now bring them home.
Oh, you only just left work. Okay. Okay. Damn, do you have a long day? Or do you just have a, like a closing shift? Yeah, why can't I just put him in the passenger seat then?
On and then immediately split off into two separate paths. Unlike Skyrim, there is a waterfall to explain the source of the water itself, but still, short of this being the Hyrule Continental Divide, there's no real great reason why the water should go both.
Let's kind of jam into that song. Get a long day today. And tomorrow's gonna be a late day as well. Okay. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Custom chiral ladder. I already have some of these. I don't need these.
Good work. New order available. Please access delivery terminal for further.
24 pieces of cargo. Am I gonna have room for this? Yeah, it's fine. This is where I'd like to keep it.
Order assigned.
This guy's a big boy.
Ways. Do you remember that question I asked you earlier about where the only sloping water in this game is? It's right here in Zora's Domain. This sloping water can be followed in reverse up these slides until you reach the tops of these spires where it all begins. The options for explanation here are really only twofold. Either it just rains so much here that the water never stops, or there's some sort of technology that pumps water up from the reservoir. Based on the waterfall spawning machines, I'm going with the latter. Wizard magic. One of the other waterfalls can be followed back stepwise to a place called Mipha's Court, a fantastical fountain with intricate sculptures and structures, the water from which can be traced all the way back to this little point called Shatterback Point, I think is what it's called. And all of that water seems to, once again, just come from wizard magic. Even groundwater seepage can't explain all of this stuff. Honestly, there's no other place in these games where there's so much hydrological irrationality as in Zora's Domain. So the only conclusion I can reasonably draw is that being fish people, they have some sort of command of the water that we'll just never fully understand. It's not all magic though, they also do engineering. They've built the world's largest freshwater reservoir here at East Lake. A lot of the water from Zora's Domain comes out of East Lake Reservoir, and the Zora have also dammed up the south end of the lake, creating a calmly flowing Rutala River down below. I'm not saying this dam is hydroelectric, but based on what we've seen of the Zora's technological capabilities, I wouldn't put it past them. That Rutala River ultimately flows back down and reconnects directly with the Lanairu wetlands, completing the loop and closing every single loose end we have on our diagram, which means we should be able to look at it and figure out the answer to those questions that we asked at the beginning. Where does all of this start and where does all of this end? Based on everything we've seen, we can glean a few things. One, Hyrule seems to be one large basin rather than multiple, meaning all of the water ultimately connects via streams, rivers, or groundwater movement. Number two, the primary source of this river system is, drumroll please, the East Reservoir Lake. There are other smaller sources for the various tributaries, but the vast majority of it starts right here, courtesy of the Zora, which is a fun touch given the cultural role that the Zora play in the Zelda games. And number three, there is not one, but two endpoints for this river system, Lake Hylia and the unnamed lake near Gerudo Canyon Pass. You heard me right. Half of the water in Hyrule goes to the most iconic water feature in the entire Zelda series, and the other half of it goes to a lake that they didn't even bother to name because it was so unremarkable. What I want to know, honestly, is if the developers of the game even knew this fact. I could really see a world where they just connected all the rivers and lakes without too much thought, and if you asked, I bet they would half guess and say that it all goes to Lake Hylia. But it doesn't. It goes somewhere so much less notable, and in some ways, so much more interesting. Now, those of you with the keen eye will probably note that I did skip something pretty important. There's a huge waterfall coming from the sky above
the still breathing. We've also managed to complete a working prototype for a new type of autonomous delivery bot. Feel free to fabricate one for yourself. Be advised, however, that you can only have a single unit active in a given region.
Fuck is a buddy bot? Huh. You telling me this guy is just gonna follow me around? Incapable of traversing rocky or uneven terrain. Keep you in mind. Shoot. I might call it. I might have to call it here. The boys are gonna be around pretty soon. And I'm gonna go throw something on the stove and leave it unattended. Let's finish this video. It's less than, it's like 3 minutes left.
Filling it up very directly. Why haven't we followed that waterfall back to its source? Okay, fine. Let's follow that waterfall to its source, and what we will find is that it all spawns out of this platform right here. They actually call this area near the water temple the Great Wellspring of Hyrule, which does imply that all the water comes from it. But in terms of being physically connected, all of these islands with all their waterfalls are just completely separate, with all of their water just pouring over the sides and into the air. Which kind of explains why it rains so much. You know, like, look at all this water that's just being wasted. It's not being wasted, I mean, it's going back into the water cycle, turning into clouds that then rain down upon Hyrule. Even the water temple itself, the big spouts, does the same thing. It just dumps it all off the edge. So sure, you could make the argument that in some ways these floating sky islands are the real source of water for the river system here, but I don't think I accept that. I think that's a little bit like saying that rain is the true source of the Mississippi River and that Lake Itasca is just one more stop in the water cycle, which is literally true. All of this is just water and gravity. That we even call them lakes and rivers and streams is largely just ontological utility, but that's what we do. We make categories so that we can make sense, and we make sense because that's the thing that only we can do. And if we didn't do it, nobody would, and so we have rivers. And so I have this video. So I'm talking to you. As far as the in-game lore is concerned, though, I actually sort of like to think of the Sky Islands as allegory more than anything. Zelda has always built its stories as legend, almost like you're hearing the story told to you hundreds of years after the fact with particular stylings and exaggerations, hence the many different art styles the games have taken over the years. So when you tell me that the Great Temple in the sky is where all the rain and water comes from, I think of it more like saying thunder and lightning are angels bowling rather than, hey, actually, if you go in the sky with a video camera, you'll find a bowling alley full of people with wings. Now, that said, it does rain a fuck ton in this game, and all of this water being dumped directly into the atmosphere certainly isn't helping things in that regard. Wait, I almost forgot. I stayed up until 4 a.m. one night making this very crude animation of all the water flowing in Hyrule, and I wanted to show it to you. I didn't really have a good place to put it in the video, so here it is. Enjoy.
Yeah, you guys don't get to see this. Yeah, you guys don't get to see this. I'm gonna do the outro pretty soon here. So this is, that was Where Do Hyrule's Rivers Go by Annie Austin.
I'm Annie Austin. Thanks for watching.
There you go. We watched a few of his, listened to rather, a few of his videos tonight. He does, like, fun, really informative, dare I say, data-driven videos on topics that questions that no one's really asking, but that's the fun of it. All right, what do we have here? Your Partner J, Arasaka Corporation. The Novelist's Son, a new type of cryptobiote. Eating it gives you increased blood regeneration. That's cool. that just a straight upgrade, or are they different kinds that I can choose from? I don't know. Your partner Jay, recovery request. I need you to secure its ship in BT country. The order is at Mountain Knot City. How many quests are there from Jay? It's a fantastic question. I don't know. Okay. I'm gonna call it here. We made some fantastic progress. Edging ever so closer to being done with this game. With all the achievements on Steam, rather. I'm not completely 100%ing it. That sounds not even terrible, I would say. It's just going to take a long time to get all of the orders where they need to go. That would just take a while. And even then, we're still chipping away at it pretty darn well. Hardest thing still is just going to be getting everything on the network. We need those 2 or 3 more areas. And that's that. All right. For a Friday night, there's actually not all that much going on. Kraken is doing PoE 2. Cleo is doing Civ 6 multiplayer with some of her buddies. Yeah, that seems to be the vibes here. I don't think Mike is I mean, he's not live. Did he stream? He did not stream tonight. Okay. Okay. Thank you guys for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your night, and I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.